Good morning. Good morning. I know we still have a couple others joining. It's 9 o'clock on the dot. So I will wait another minute as we let everybody come in and join for today's webinar on the Squeegee Collaborative Action Plan. I thank you all for joining today. I'm Shelonda Stokes, President of Downtown Partnership of Baltimore, and I have three guests with me today who are put in a lot of time and a lot of effort to help us get here today. And so I really want to maximize the time. What we'll do today is sort of go through a short, brief presentation of the Squeegee Action Plan. We want to make sure that we give an overview and update for everybody to see. And then we want to make sure we leave a lot of time, reserved time for Q&A. This is really about leaning in, understanding the elements of the plan and hearing your questions, your voice, because this is additive. I actually did a post earlier today for anybody who follows. I did a post today, and the post opened with, "We are not animals. We are human. We need your help." And that was a quote that was taken from Victoria, who is this young 18-year-old woman who was a part of this Squeegee Collaborative process. And we, met with her, right, as we were in here. But the day that we launched the Squeegee Action Plan was the first day I felt her in that way. And what she said is, we need help, right? And so to that, part of what we're talking about today is, how do we as a community respond, right? Do we rush to aid, and do we retreat? Do we look away? Like, what is our overall response to this going to be? And so Mayor Scott charged a group of people, and he said, you know what, this isn't a monolithic, there's no monolithic solution, no monolithic thought. A number of people are weighing in and need to weigh in. We know that people who are squeegeeing have a voice. We know the community and residents have a voice. We know the business community has a voice. There's a legal voice. There's a myriad, right? Government, all of these people have an opinion about, an interest in what happens as it relates to squeegee. And so he convened this group, and this group met. It was about 150 people meeting week after week after week. And then there were break-off meetings. I know here at Downtown Partnership, our board convened and special stakeholders convened after that, because we wanted to make sure that as many voices heard. We went into the community, right? And we wanted to make sure that we were in the church, and we had over 200 people attend there, and they weighed in. And so part of it is, how do we get to a plan that addresses and sort of meets in the middle of where our needs are? And so today, the guests that I have are going to tell us a little bit about that plan. I'm going to start off with introducing Deputy Mayor Faith Leach. I don't know if we call her the conductor, the master, or whatever in it, but she's been helping guide us, from the mayor's lens and perspective around, how we navigate this and make sure all voices are there. We have John Brothers, who is the president of the Rowe Price Foundation, who wanted to make sure we were layering in also the business and philanthropic voice of this. And we have Joe Jones, the founder and president of the Center for Urban Families. And when you think about an organization that's vested in the community and making sure that they bring in that voice, it was that. But this isn't the entire group, right? These are sort of the conveners, leaders of the group. Like I said, there were 150, and it's massive. And if you go to my site, you see a little bit of the picture. That still doesn't encompass everybody. So I won't belabor it all today. I will ask that if you have questions, that you put them in the Q&A box. I will also ask that as we do this, that we keep it as respectful as possible, because there are voices on all sides, and it's hard. We want to get to a solution. And if we get a ton of questions, I may not be able to get to all of them, but we commit that we will get back to you, because we want to engage and keep, as many people included in this process as possible. So Q&A box, we'll do that. That's how you get your questions in. I'm going to start off, Deputy Mayor Leach, and I know we have a presentation that we want to pull up and do this, but I want to come to you first to really help with us setting sort of the tone of this. And unlike sort of moderating back and forth now, if you guys will kind of pass it off where it makes sense, I think we can go that way. And then I'll come back. And if there are questions that come in and I need to interject, I may do that. And if not, I'll, we'll figure it out, because this is sort of free flowing in the sense that we want to make sure everybody is heard. So with that, Deputy Mayor Leach, I'm turning it over to you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Shelonda, and good morning, downtown Baltimore. As Shelonda said, my name is Faith Leach, and I am the Deputy Mayor of Equity, Health, and Human Services right here in the City of Baltimore. I co-led the Squeegee Collaborative, as Shelonda mentioned, alongside John Brothers and Joe Jones. And so today we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of the Squeegee Collaborative's working action plan. And that word working action plan is key because this is a living, breathing document that will change over time. But before we get into the details of the Squeegee Action Plan, I did want to take a second to pause. I wanted to pause for a second and just lift up some of the folks that are on this call. One, I want to acknowledge Shelonda and her steadfast leadership. She has been a partner in this work from day one before the Squeegee Collaborative ever existed. And so I just want to thank Shelonda for being by our side, for pushing us, for representing the needs of the business community. So thank you, Shelonda, for all that you do. I also want to make sure to acknowledge the many business owners and the business leaders that are on this call. I want you to know that throughout this process, we heard from businesses. So this was about making sure that we heard from those folks on the ground. We heard you, we hear your feelings, and your concerns are real. Our city is great in large part due to the amazing businesses that are a part of our city. And so I just want to take a second just to thank you all for continuing to bet on Baltimore through the good times and through some of the more difficult times. Now we'll get into the Squeegee Collaborative recommendations. So when we started this process, we wanted to ensure that we anchored this work in history. We know that our city has been grappling with this issue for the past 40 years. And so what we did was we actually spent some time looking at past plans. We looked at articles, we looked at news clippings about this issue that has been going on in our city since at least the 1980s. And from there, we developed our strategy for how we were going to tackle this issue. We looked at the things that were included in past plans and the things that were missing from past plans. And what we then developed was our framework for how we were going to address this issue. And so we decided that there were three main areas that we needed to tackle in order to really make an impact and eliminate or eradicate the need to squeegee in our community. Those three areas are: one, support services, which we will go into greater detail about. The next bucket is accountability and or enforcement. And then the last piece is around governance, data, and measurement. I think all the folks on this call know that, you can't manage it if you can't measure it. And so we wanted to ensure that we were building a strong infrastructure for governance and managing the recommendations that are a part of the Squeegee Collaborative that will outlive the folks who are on the collaborative. So now we'll spend some time digging into each of the recommendations, and all of these recommendations in the full plan can be found on the Squeegee Collaborative website. I'll make sure that we drop that link inside of the chat so that you can actually spend time with what we think is a holistic document that really digs deep into this work. I'm going to pause here and turn it over to Joe so that Joe can spend some time walking through a couple of the support services recommendation, and we will likely pass this around between Joe, John, and I.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Leach. Good morning, everybody. Shelonda, first, thank you for inviting Deputy Mayor Leach, John, and I to, be with your group to talk about a plan. This is very personal for me. I'm a lifelong resident of Baltimore City. My mother lives on Light Street, across the street from the Inner Harbor, a couple of blocks from the intersection of Light and Conway. Over the history of our city, I've seen a couple of things that I think have drawn my attention to our city in ways in which, really shook me to my core. One is when Martin Luther King was assassinated, and I was a young boy and not really understanding what was taking place. In 2015, the uprising associated with the death of Freddie Gray pulled our city apart. And then in July of this year, the incident at Light and Conway, which really is unfortunate in many, many ways, but it really took the scab off of a sore to help us to understand the challenges we have with young people in our city, in this case, squeegee workers, and what we need to do collectively. And when I think about the collaborative, I tease Mayor Scott and Deputy Mayor Leach. I'm never taking a call from them again, right? This has been really heavy. I've known Shelonda the longest along my journey in Baltimore. I've worked somewhat with John, and I've known Deputy Mayor Leach least. However, over this process, we have come to know each other in very intimate and very personal and very professional and very committed ways. And so what you will see is a body of work that's been informed in a couple of ways. One, it's been informed by the collaborative, and we thought very thoughtfully about, should the collaborative be exclusive, meaning we identify certain people, we invite them to come, or do we make it more inclusive, which is a little bit harder of a challenge to manage? And we opted for the exclusive, right? I mean, the inclusive and the transparent. And so we had representatives from the business community. We had squeegee workers who were a part of the collaborative, folks from philanthropy, folks from the human services sector, representatives from city agencies. We had the deputy city solicitor, the police commissioner, and squeegee workers interfacing with one another so that the exchange was real and it was authentic. And we didn't propose something or include something that wasn't a part of the discourse associated with that group's input. And then there was a very important body of work I want you all to have an appreciation for, which was a community-based participatory research project that was led by Dr. Kyla Liggett-Creel at University of Maryland. And that process required that she engage with a group of squeegee workers that we refer to as the Squeegee leadership team. She worked with them to design a survey. They administered the survey to their peers at intersections across the city. That data was synthesized and they reported their findings to the collaborative at a meeting that we held earlier this year. And that combination of the Squeegee Collaborative with their different experiences, with the squeegee workers, community-based participatory research project, and our own understanding of the needs of Baltimore, informed by representatives of the business community who were part of the collaborative. And that led to the Squeegee Collaborative Action Plan. And I'm going to touch on a few of the recommendations under support services, but I'm also going to turn to Deputy Mayor Leach, particularly around recommendation 6. It's really important to understand there was no recommendation, no idea that was off the table. We allow people to bring their full, authentic set of ideas to the table. And through the process of analyzing, discussing, pulling apart, we then landed on the recommendations that you see within the report. So recommendation 1, establish a network of providers across key service areas with deep knowledge and experience working with boys and young men of color, young women, and gender non-conforming youth. You already heard Shelonda mention very early on Victoria. Victoria is a young lady. She presents the way in which is authentic for her, right? And so we have young people who are on the corners who are women, right? Who present the way that they want to present. We have young people who are above working age. We also have young people who are not who are under working age, who should be in Baltimore City schools. And that's a really important point to consider as we think about the types of services that are needed to address the holistic nature of the population of folks who are at those intersections. Recommendation 2, hire and train navigators or credible mentors to provide intense case management and guidance to squeegee youth navigating both city services and services offered by the network of providers. It's important to note that we know what we know about these young people because we engage them, but also because of the tremendous work being done by the Mayor's Office of African American Male Engagement. This is the group that has been working on corners prior to the collaborative coming together. They've identified X number of young people, the approximate number of young people who squeegee across the city, and they also have the set of intersections that we know that these young people present at. And they also have information, the demographic information they capture on it. Important to note that the Mayor's Office of African American Male Engagement, or MOANG, does not have the current capacity to take on the breadth of work that's necessary to address this issue holistically. And you'll hear more about that from John later on. Recommendation 3, connect Squeegee workers with workforce opportunities, including work readiness programs, training, and full-time employment by leveraging opportunities in our local business community, hire up, and other subsidized employment programs. Some of these services are services that are already in place and are being taken advantage of, and young people are working as a result of the outreach to them on the corner, pulling them into these opportunities. But we need to scale that, and that will be a part of what the plan will entail as well. Partner with local businesses and nonprofit organizations that provide training to further refine the entrepreneurial skills of Squeegee workers and launch a fund to seed successful business. We are not naive to the fact that just saying entrepreneurship is not something that's easy to take on. So we want to make sure that the young people have an idea of what it means to actually start a business, and not to give them the false sense of you can start from where you are now and go into a business the next day. This is really about ramping up ideas, inspiring thoughts, and allowing them to share their hopes and dreams and ideas, but wrapping around support that allows them to get from step A to step B well before you get to the point of a business. I'll skip number 6 and come back to Deputy Mayor Leach in a second. But recommendation 7, partner with Baltimore Police Department to deploy police cadets during their training phase to corners where workers squeegee to engage and educate them on available services and support. This is really a really important development, along with the participation of Baltimore City schools that will also have outreach workers deployed to intersections across the city in partnership with the collaborative. And now I'll pass it on to Deputy Mayor Leach.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Joe. So for recommendation 6, so this is one I think we've seen a question in the chat, and I know there's been a lot of chatter about this recommendation in particular. And so I think it's a great opportunity for us to dispel some inaccuracies about this. So this recommendation, which is around incentivizing squeegee workers to participate in workforce education and entrepreneurship training, this is what we are calling earn and learn. And so earn and learn is a successful workforce development model, which is essentially the same thing as OJT, or on-the-job training. So these young people or squeegee workers will be employed at local businesses, they'll be enrolled in an entrepreneurship program, or they may be getting paid training, and they'll get paid to participate in those programming opportunities. In addition to that, they do have to commit to no longer participating in squeegee activity. So this is, again, about earning and learning. There is no payment without work. There is no payment without participation in workforce training. And so, again, this is creating that alternative career pathway to really motivate young people to move off of the corner.
Perfect.
All right.
Yeah.
And now we can move over to the accountability recommendations, along with governance, data, and measurement. And so I will kick us off on accountability, and then John, I'll hand it over to you midpoint so that we can talk through accountability and then shift to governance, data, and measurement. So accountability, I know this is one of the main areas that we've had a lot of concern and a lot of feedback on. And so we've taken all of that collective feedback around accountability. We brought together a team of lawyers. So we had the city's lawyers. We also brought some lawyers from private practice, and we debated the issue, right? I will tell you that this was our most difficult conversation, but it was a conversation that we needed to have as a city with all of the different voices at the table. And here is where we landed. The first recommendation is around disallowing panhandling in solicitation in a set of high traffic zones based on data, including traffic accidents and calls for service. What you will see in a subsequent slide is a map that shows what we are calling the 6 disallowed zones. What I will tell you is that we are data-driven. This work was data-driven. And so we will continue to use data to drive how we implement this recommendation. And so those 6 high traffic zones, the majority of those zones are off of major highways, off of major entry points into the city. And we looked at, again, 311 calls, 911 calls. We looked at other calls for service, car accidents and injuries that happen in these thoroughfares to come up with those 6 disallowed zones. The way that we will implement this is starting January the 10th. BPD will issue a warning if there is a squeegee worker or someone panhandling in a disallowed zone. The first step will be a warning. That second step will be another warning, but a referral for services. So we talked a lot about services at the top. The beauty of this plan is that one part can't exist without the other. And so there will be a referral for services at that second warning. At that third warning, we've now given you two opportunities, right? We've connected you to services and outreach workers and mentorship, and yet and still we are seeing you squeegee or participate in this activity in a disallowed zone. You will then receive a citation, and how that citation will be enforced will be, again, up to the state's attorney. The second recommendation is around working with the Squeegee Worker Leadership Team. So Joe mentioned the Squeegee Worker Leadership Team, and they worked with Dr. Kyla Liggett-Creel from the University of Maryland School of Social Work to develop a survey, and they surveyed each other, and they were a part of this process. So we want to work with that leadership team because we know that there needs to be some level of self-regulation, right? These young people need to hold themselves and need to hold each other accountable. And so we want to really hone the leadership team skills of that group and help them develop this code of conduct for how they will regulate themselves. In addition to that, this is a really important recommendation, and Joe pushed us a lot on this, and this is around those school age youth. I think we've all driven by an intersection and we've seen a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old that is squeegeeing windows when they should be in school. And so we work very closely with Baltimore City Schools to develop a recommendation. And so where we landed, and they actually have already ramped up, where they have hired an organization that has 4 outreach workers as well as vans. They will be going across the city in the main areas where we see young people squeegeeing, and they have the ability to recruit those young people to go back into school or to help them on site re-enroll into school where they are disconnected and not enrolled in school. The other important part of this is that we now have the ability to do a data bump with the school system and with the Mayor's Office of African American Male Engagement. So as we are out doing outreach and connecting with young people on corners, we can go back to the school system and figure out if that young person should be enrolled in school and is not enrolled in school, and we can do the necessary work to connect with their parents to get them back in school. So this is a very, very important recommendation. And I will add, it is something that this city has not done in years. The next one is around instituting actions for drivers that disrupt traffic when engaging with panhandlers and solicitors in disallowed locations. So we're about to go through a period of public education. It's going to be education for drivers, but also education for squeegee workers. And we want to hold everyone accountable, right? This is about the safety of everyone involved, and we all have to play a part in accountability. The next recommendation is around continuing to enforce that criminal activity, right? We have been enforcing criminal activity as it relates to theft and vandalism, malicious destruction of property. We've seen some recent arrests around theft, for example. And so we want to make sure that BPD knows that they have the ability and they should continue to enforce any criminal activity in addition to the disallowed zones. And then the last one is around educating motorists and squeegee workers on the accountability framework through a public education campaign. The mayor likened this to the cameras that are on I-83, right? We all needed that ramp up period, that education period, where we were informed of the new kind of consequences for speeding. And so the same thing will happen around these disallowed zones. We want to make sure that we're educating the public, that we're educating squeegee workers about what it means to be in a disallowed zones and what actions will happen if there is this activity happening in a disallowed zone. The other thing that I will mention here is that we also have provided alternatives, right? So if there is a driver or if there is a person that wants to contribute to a squeegee worker, to someone that might be soliciting, we've actually partnered with, or Rowe Price and Baltimore Core came together, and John will talk a little bit more about this, and developed a platform called Shine, where motorists can actually go online, they can pick out the individual squeegee worker and they can donate to them, right? This is about making sure that we're helping young people achieve their goals in a way that is safe for young people as well as for motorists. So those are the accountability recommendations. I am sure there are tons of questions. I'm going to actually shift over to the chat and start to answer some of those while I turn it over to John, who will talk through governance, data, and measurement.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Deputy Mayor Leach. Go ahead, Shelonda.
Before you start, just one thing, Deputy Mayor Leach, if you don't want to answer them all or don't have time, part of what we'll do at the end is we'll also answer them live. So whatever you feel like you can do immediately, do, because we want to get through as many as possible, but don't feel like you have to get through them all.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So a couple of things before I launch into governance, data, and measurement. And so first thing is, it's been an honor to work alongside Joe and Faith and Shelonda and so many of the other partners. I think on this A team, I served as somewhat of the historian of the work, in looking at the past. This is the third mayor that I've been part of a squeegee process on. And so part of that was to say, well, let's look back in the past. And so in each of the areas, Joe highlighted services. Services actually has been the one constant between the previous plans. There's been about over a dozen of them since the early 80s. But the difference is the way we approach services. There's several aspects of that work that is different than what's been done in the past. And I won't necessarily go over those in detail, but the idea of using the amazing providers in Baltimore to help provide those services is actually something that's pretty new, right? The idea of using navigators to help these young people navigate a really complex service system. All of these young people need that. And what I would say on the enforcement side is enforcement services and governance are not siloed. They interconnect together. And the best accountability plan is to have a good services plan. And so we really want to make sure that our services are really done well. As you can imagine, what we wanted this process to be is a community-owned process, right? And we also wanted it to be constitutional. So you'll see on the bottom of this page in the plan, it talks about that constitutional nature. The idea of taking 150 different voices, creating a plan that's never been done and make it constitutional, that's almost like putting an elephant through a keyhole. But we did it, right? And we ultimately found a way to kind of produce what you see before you is Baltimore's best plan that we've ever produced that's comprehensive and addresses all of these areas. The previous plans never had an accountability part of the plan. It was all services based. It also, the area I'm going to get into is it never had kind of the creation of a back office and the supports and infrastructure needed to maintain this over the long term. And so I'll go over some of these really quick. I was reading some of the questions too. I'll try to marinate a couple of answers in there that make sense. But the five kind of governance, data, and measurement areas. Our first is that we want to formalize the Squeegee Collaborative as a subgroup within the structure of the Boys and Young Men of Color initiative. And so there's an initiative that's already in place in the city. What we've done here is created the Squeegee, or maintaining the Squeegee Collaborative with its own leadership team and governance structure that includes all of, aspects of all of the folks that came together, including and often led by the young people that are there. The young people that participated in this process were paid. They were meaningful. We could not have done this without them. Their perspectives were key in all of these areas, and they will be involved in helping lead this effort as we move forward. And so that's recommendation one. Recommendation two is that there is, I am fortunate enough to work for an amazing company, Rowe Price, and there's a number of you on here that represent also amazing companies and businesses. And, Baltimore often is a city that struggles with infrastructure, and that is what companies can help provide to help this initiative move forward. And so we created, Rowe Price and other partners in the city created an initiative a couple of years ago called Civic Innovators. One of the best things that Rowe Price can provide in terms of supporting our community is our amazing talent, like you all have amazing talent at your companies. And so we've put together this initiative called Civic Innovators, which ultimately will blend cross-corporate or cross-business teams to come together to support this initiative in a number of ways. And so we're going to work with Civic Innovators, which is upheld by Baltimore Core as our partner that does a lot of the heavy lifting on this, and the corporate community comes together with our talent. And they're going to be supporting the Mayor's Office of African American Male Engagement, because they're going to be kind of the hub and spokes of this initiative. And they're relatively a new agency, and we want to support them. One of the goals is to make sure that they as an agency are stronger and they can support this amazing initiative as we move forward. Recommendation 3 is to make sure that that we have a plan that both addresses short-term and long-term resources that are going to be needed for this initiative. As you can imagine, you're going to need sources of resources to make this work. And so we are going to think of a variety of ways of how this can be resourced. So when we look at the services mix, we already have a lot of providers that can do some of that work. So it's using existing resources. Some of that might be looking at longer grants to help with the Learn and Earn initiative. There might be philanthropic and corporate support that can help in a number of these areas. And so we're going to have a comprehensive development strategy that's going to sustain this both short-term and long-term. The fourth one is, we want citizens of Baltimore to be able to keep in contact with this initiative and see how it's going. And so there will be a public dashboard that's going to monitor and track the report on these efforts on key metrics that we've already started to identify. And we just want to make sure that the city and anyone in it that cares about this initiative always can kind of see where this initiative is going. And then finally, we want to be able to evaluate this not only on an ongoing basis to make sure that the service providers are doing the things that they need to be doing. Are we managing case management really well? How is accountability going? And so we want to have a really good partnership with an evaluation partner to help kind of look at this on an ongoing basis. And so again, I'll throw it back to Shelonda, and Deputy Mayor Leach, but I think it's important for those that are watching this right now to understand that both the accountability structure and the kind of governance, data, and measurement structure are really new additions to the thinking of how to do this work around young people at Squeegee. And so we're really excited about these two components being added to the services mix. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, John. Before I take it over and kind of go back to some of the questions and stuff I want to ask, is it anything of the panelists that you want to say that you didn't before we get into the Q&A?
Yeah, one thing, the two things for me. One is the fact that, this plan represents the very best of Baltimore, right? And just like the Ravens, right? Or any sports team or any business, you have a playbook, right? That everybody is aware of, is familiar with, and you go into your executing your strategy or into the game with that playbook in mind. And each game, you have a game plan for that. The Ravens may fall behind or things may not go as expected in the first half, but at halftime, you take a step back and you analyze what took place and you begin to make adjustments. Our plan is an action plan that has that flexibility. And because of the governance structure, we'll be able to look at data and make those kind of adjustments, over time. And the other thing is, coming back to the backbone organization, MOAIM, that John mentioned and has been referenced a couple of times, we want this work to be sustained through any kind of administration change, right? We don't want Mayor A, Mayor B, or Mayor C to leave office, and because some new leader comes in, the work has a chance to be shifted or minimized. And so we really want to set up this organization so it has a sustainability. So this is not an issue that we address today and data goes down and we come back. And it's one thing I've asked Deputy Mayor Leach if she would refer to, because she's closest to it, but what the young people did around the CIAA basketball tournament and how the data with respect to what happened on those corners shifted.
Yeah, thank you for that, Joe. So prior to the Squeegee Collaborative, which began their work back in July of this year, the mayor, I want to say in November of 2021, had put forward a 90-day Squeegee action plan. And really what that 90-day plan was about was really testing and ideating on a couple of concepts. And one of those concepts was around same-day work, same-day pay, right? And so what we really wanted to test is if we could replace the income that young people make when they squeegee on corners, would they take us up on it, right? And so so what we did was we reached out to our partners over at the Downtown Partnership, and we talked to them about what supports they needed, specifically around the CIAA basketball tournament. And so Shelonda and her team said, you know, we want to make this city beautiful while we have all these guests in town. And so we would love your support in supplementing our, our Clean Core program. And so what we did was we hired young people who were squeegeeing out on corners. So we, were boots on the ground, connecting with young people on corners. And we said, hey, we will pay you $75 a day to work alongside of the Downtown Partnership and their Clean Core team, cleaning the city for the CIAA basketball tournament. What we found was we were able to bring on, I want to say it was 24 young people that consistently participated in the program for 7 days. And the Downtown Partnership ended up hiring 2 or 3 of those young people in open slots that they have. But what we saw was a significant decline, almost no squeegee activity happening during the tournament because we provided an alternative opportunity for those young people. So what we do know here is that when provided an opportunity, many of the young people that squeegee will take us up on that opportunity. It is about us, meaning the city and all of our partners, coming together to ensure that we are providing those meaningful opportunities. And I want to be clear about one thing. This isn't going to be a perfect process, right? There's going to be a young person that might not show up for work or might be late for work. But what's important, I think, in this plan is that we are being very dogged in our commitment to young people, and we're not giving up on them because we know what the alternative is. So thank you for shooting that over to me, Joe.
Shelonda, I would just add one quick thing. I think one of the things as part of our review on this is that we did talk with folks in other cities that were going through very similar areas. So folks in Atlanta, folks in New York City. And I think for us, I think what we learned is the importance of the backbone organization is that as Deputy Mayor Leach just said, we are going to have to shape and shift ourselves on an ongoing basis as we learn about what's going on. We have disallowed zones right now, right? And what we're going to see is those zones may shift, right? We may see different things as we learn about the zones. We also may see different things about services, right? So the goal of creating the backbone organization and the governance structure was that we know that there's a lot of moving parts in this. And you can't tackle what you need to tackle in this unless you have the proper backbone and governance structure to be able to do that, and that we're learning on an ongoing basis. So I just think it's important for folks to kind of understand that the squeegee effort of today, we're going to be monitoring it, and we're going to be shifting and shaping ourselves to meet what squeegee might look like tomorrow. But I think the overall goal, and I think both the young people said this, is that they don't want a squeegee. Right. We want this to not be here. Right. And they had cited many times a number of dreams that they had. And I think our goal is their goal is to not have them on the corners, but for them to be fulfilling their promise in a variety of areas. That's really exciting.
So thank you, John, and all. And I'm going to switch to some questions and we'll try to navigate this as best as possible. To sort of summarize, though, before I shift, what you all collectively said is that we believe we came up with a strategy that assists, right, meets people where they are to help. We believe we came up with a strategy that provides an on-ramp to greater pathways. And we understand the importance of balancing providing service with ensuring there's accountability, right? And so what you all said is this plan is not perfect. We know it, but it's evolving, it's living. And so there are ways that we can continue to lean in. We know it's not finished. It will continue to evolve, and we're willing to roll up our sleeves and get it done. What's great about the chat is that it's people who want to lean in. So I will ask a blanket question, I think, around engagement. Before I do that, I do want to do a call out. I know that Sue Carlin always participates. I know we always try to make sure there's closed captioning. There were some challenges with getting it on the Zoom today, but we will make sure that when we rebroadcast via YouTube, that the closed captioning is there. We want to make sure all voices are in this work, and apologize for anybody who couldn't engage at this level. I do want to throw out there also it's so many supports. It's entrepreneurs who are on here, service providers. This isn't the end. How do people engage? And that's for any of you to answer.
So
Yeah, I
as
mean,
we,
go ahead.
so as we build out this model, there are existing services. So for example, the Center for Urban Families we have existing resources that we can deploy to support young people who squeegee. And I know that I think I saw something in the chat about families. We also can extend our services to the families of the young people who squeegee, right? But we also know we're going to find gaps. There's already 2 gaps that we know that aren't easily fillable in the services mix, if you will. One is around behavioral health, mental health, particularly for young people, right? We've got to build up our capacity to address some of the trauma, some of the stress. A lot of the young people are telling us they're trying to cope with circumstances that many of us can't even begin to understand. And so one of a sanctuary for them, as an example, is to be on a corner with their peers squeegeeing. Right? As crazy as it seems, it's like whoever plays golf, you know, how the golf course can be a sanctuary for you, right? We want to be able to address that particular gap. Also, when we think about literacy, right? A number of our young people, as we engage with them, the Squeegee leadership team in particular, they got to know us, they got to trust us. They became vulnerable. They disclosed to us some of the things they were grappling with, including the fact that they did not do well in school at all for whatever the reason was. They fell behind. And now to catch up, the gap between where they are and where they need to be is so vast. We need to, beyond what city schools can provide, we need to find resources that can deal with literacy in a way that's appropriate for this particular population. So we've got to identify those gaps. But the family services and the services that are needed to address this population will have to be built out. And the team, the Mayor's Office of African American Male Engagement, has already been meeting with service providers, organizing how they will contribute their resources to support this. And then where there are gaps, we will look to the business and philanthropic community to fill some of those gaps.
Yep. The other thing that I'll say that we've also talked about, there are so many people across this city that are very interested in this issue, and they all want to be a part of the solution. And so we are excited about having so many people that want to be a part of the solution. And so what we've been talking about, because we've been getting so much incoming, is actually doing a session, an information session for service providers so that they can learn about the plan, they can hear some of the needs that we have and where the gaps that we are trying to fill. So we'll be sure that once we pull together that session for service providers, that we share that information with the downtown partnership so that we can get it out there, and any service providers that are interested can participate. And then also I will put this, I've already put it in the chat, I think in response to a question, but we actually have a Squeegee Collaborative email address. And so if you have questions, if you want to just learn more about the plan, you can actually email, it is all together one word, Squeegee Collaborative at baltimorecity.gov, and I'll drop that in the chat as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It's so many questions. I know what I think we're going to do, because we won't get to them all before 10, but what we'll do is we will pull those questions down and try to circulate them to you so we can get it out to everybody who registered. It's important that we hear all of the voices here. One of the questions, another one, and I know Deputy Mayor, you talked about a little bit earlier, but we're still getting a lot of money, a lot of questions around the money, right? Are we paying, how are we paying? Where's the money for payment coming from? What does that look like in terms of the Earn and Learn program?
Yep. So I'd love to go into more detail about that. So we were being very thoughtful about leveraging existing resources. So earlier in the year, the mayor dedicated about $30 million to workforce development, $30 million in ARPA dollars to workforce development at the Mayor's Office of Employment Development. What we've currently been doing, even before the Squeegee Collaborative, is leveraging the money that is already over at MOED to do a subsidized employment program for Squeegee workers. So Squeegee workers will be able to be paid through existing funds. There won't be any new taxpayer dollars, and we'll be leveraging federal dollars that we have through the Mayor's Office of Employment Development so that those workers can receive $15 an hour for up to 35 hours per week. In addition to that, what we are talking about is adding an additional incentive to participate in the program, which again requires, participating in training and or workforce development. So squeegee workers will actually be attending work. We are pursuing a grant opportunity. The LOI actually is due today, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a pretty significant federal grant opportunity that would be used to support the additional incentive.
Perfect, thank you. This is a question that we're getting often. I know it came in the chat in various areas, and it's talking about once you have disallowed areas, is the feeling that then you start to push people into other areas?
So I'll start. So this is all about our value proposition, right? So one, we are cutting off kind of the main thoroughfares where young people make money. Those are also the thoroughfares that are the unsafest, because we have folks who are coming down highways and they're moving at high speeds. We've seen traffic accidents. We've seen young people who have been injured in those areas. And so this is, again, in pursuit of safety for young people as well as motorists. And so the idea is that we are educating young people about the other alternatives, right? We are hoping that we are building a value proposition that young people can't turn down, right? So we are saying there's a workforce opportunity for you that will put you on a career pathway, because the young people know that there's an end to squeegeeing, meaning that they will eventually hit a wall where they're not going to be able to make as much money squeegeeing. And so what we are offering is that you can potentially make more money and be on a long-term career pathway if you participate in our program. And so the hope is that they won't shift, because if they do shift, they're not going to make as much money, and they can make more money by being on a productive pathway. So that is what this is about.
Right, which just to elaborate on that, I think, and Joe mentioned it earlier in the meetings, nobody said, I just want a squeegee. What they said is, I need the money, I need the services. And so it's really looking at how you move them into the services. There's a question in the chat about the ages covered, right? We've referenced it, squeegee kids at one point, squeegee youth, squeegee young adults. What are the ages that we're talking about within the plan?
So we cover the gamut of ages, right? So we've talked about those school-age young people. I called out those 8, 10, and 12-year-olds that we see squeegeeing during school, and there's a component that addresses that. The majority a lot of the plan addresses those squeegee workers who are of working age, but then those older squeegee workers who might be above the age of 24, we are very intentional about our work, but we are not exclusive, right? So this is about touching the older squeegee workers all the way down to the younger squeegee workers and tailoring our approach to meet their needs. And so there is an opportunity for us to address the needs of older squeegee workers. You don't age out of this plan.
Got it, thank you.
And let me just also add to that, if you think about an 8 or 9-year-old, if you think about your own 8 or 9-year-old, right, you have a responsibility for that young person, right? Many of our young people, in some cases, don't have 2 parents. In some cases, they don't have 1 parent, right? They are struggling. What we know least about them is what's taking place back home. And so our services will include that function that will touch families, right? We'll have to build out the capacity to support the entire family of a young person, because we simply can't have an 8-year-old that we engage with, and we don't engage with whoever their support system or their guardians are.
Thank you, Joe. And you actually answered where I was going next. There are a couple of questions that really talk about the engagement of the parents. Have they been considered? Are they there? And so you answered a little bit, but can you elaborate just on what's next there?
Yeah, if just think about the magnitude of this work. If there are 10 young people under age 14 who are out there squeegeeing, who are connected to a family, right? That's 10 families, right? And you can multiply that by the number of people in the family to think about what it will actually take to support them. And so this whole idea, and Deputy Mayor Leach mentioned, bringing the service providers together so that we can identify exactly what resources and what competencies the current providers have that will allow us to deploy resources, not to just the young person, but to their families as well. This is being built out in a way that, going back to John's, reminding us of what wasn't available in prior plans. There was nothing like this being built out in a prior plan that looked at the whole constitution of a young person's life and their family. And so we'll be building it out. And again, data will, the whole question about people moving from one zone to another area, right? The data will inform our deployment strategy. And so we'll adjust accordingly, like anybody would do in the business when you run up against an unanticipated, roadblock.
Thank you for the elaboration. Part of what we're talking about now between this phase of we launch the plan and we get to live is all of the magic that needs to happen, right? So there is a comms plan, as Deputy Mayor Leach talked about. We need to make sure people know the disallowed areas. We need to know where to go, how to access Shine, how to give when you want to give. But we also need to put sort of the meat to the bone in how we make it work. And Commissioner Harrison, I know, has been very integrated in this process. And one of the things that I know he's taken with the police department is how do we now really implement this and make sure that it's real and we make sure everything is happening at the presser. I know he talked about, we want to make sure that we're on the same page about, is it a day between if they have a violation? One of the questions, or a few of the questions that's coming on here now, really starts to talk about how do we, understanding that a number of the people who are squeegeeing may not have licenses or IDs, how do we start to move that through? Because how do you hold somebody accountable if you don't really know who they are, right? And I know we don't have all of the answers to that, but it's, kind of working through that process. So on all of it, and I know for what's next on that piece of it, these next 30 days, we will continue it's more than 30 now. How many days exactly? Days, hours, minutes, right? Until January 10th is about us working through all of those details, making sure that we know how, 1 + 1 and what's next is going to happen. How is the team going to disseminate the information to the action plan more broadly? Like, are there immediate thoughts around the communication of this?
Well,
Okay.
I think we can all.
I could direct it, right? Everybody can answer and don't want to take it over.
I'm frantically answering questions on the Q&A, and so I think I've done like 20 of them. But and letting my better parts here answer. But what I would say is, a lot of this is to be determined. Some of this is we're going to be working on a very specific communications plan with partners that are around the table, like Downtown Partnership and others, to be able to not only communicate in the disallowed zones in a broader avenue through the website and other avenues. So a lot of that is being developed. We're going to be kicking off a lot of this in early 2023, obviously on January 10th, but also this is an ongoing and moving effort. And so we're going to be working now until the beginning of January. We're going to be working hard after January to make sure that we're both communicating and providing all of these things in a good fashion.
I know, John, and what's interesting about that is I think within the community of people who have been educated about it, people are like, you know what, I'm willing to give this a chance. I see how it has all of the components. For people who don't know, right, and they only get a little bit or a snippet, or they get a point taken out of context, sometimes it's not giving the full breadth of where the plan is. One of the questions in here really talks about how we need to extend sort of this dialogue into the counties, into other places, so that people can see sort of the thoughtful approach that's happening. I don't know that in the conversations we've had, we've gone so far as to mapping out how that starts to happen. I know that is one of our directions that we really want to get that message out. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity, if there's others who want to solicit or add in from the counties or groups, how do we want to get that information to them? What is our ask for that? Because we want to make sure we're socializing this beyond just within the groups that have participated.
Yeah. So, the reason why I think doing conversations like this is so important is because there are at least 136 people that are a part of this Zoom. And so we now welcome you to the collaborative family. right? Because that is what this collaborative is about. And that's how we got to 150 people in a room attending our meetings, is because we invited everyone to be a part of the solution, and you all are a part of that solution. And so now that you've gotten this detailed briefing, we've given you the link to the report, you can also share the story of the collaborative and the work that we're doing and forward the website. But I think we can go a bit further than that, Shelonda, and even make sure that, we have a toolkit for businesses, right, that want to share information with just some quick message points about the Squeegee Collaborative, about what's about to happen on January 10th, some resources in case they're in case they want to reach out. So we want to make sure that we are bringing you in as partners in the collaborative so that you can also just share the information about the work that the collaborative is doing around this issue.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think with that, I'm just trying to go through it. So many questions. We want to make sure that we get a breadth of all of them, and a number of people who are willing to share information about the collaborative. So I think that that'll be very good in that right. One of the questions, and this comes up early, I know Deputy Solicitor Ebony does a really good job talking about the constitutionality of this in here. And so, the question comes in and says, please address the constitutional concerns to which one of the panelists referred. Is it the collaborative's understanding that the squeegee activities are entitled to qualified as First Amendment protections? If so, please explain.
Yep. And so I will do my best. I am not the deputy city solicitor, nor am I an attorney, but I will talk to you about what we heard as a part of the collaborative. And so, and I'll actually start with kind of the law that's on the books, right? There's been a lot of talk about the fact that there's been a law on the books. The law has actually been on the books for several decades and has never been enforced, because every time that we attempted to enforce it as a city, we were met with a legal challenge. I think the latest time that we tried to enforce that law was back in 2012, and we were met with a legal challenge from the ACLU. And so we know that although it's a law on the books, that it does not meet constitutional muster, which is why we have seen multiple administrations not move forward with enforcement of that particular law. On the constitutionality piece, yes, squeegeeing is seen as a form of panhandling. Panhandling is protected by the First Amendment. This has gone all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court protects panhandling as a form of free speech. And so the way that we are able to actually do these disallowed zones is because we are narrowly tailoring our approach to really balance the public safety interests of the city, right? If there was a blanket ban, then that is when we might face some constitutional challenges. But the fact that we are saying that there is a public safety interest, which is why we looked at those data pieces, but the fact that we're saying it's a public safety interest in these very specific areas, but we're not preventing the activity wholesale, allows us to do this level of enforcement. Now, if the data tells us that there continues to be a public safety interest, then we can also use that data to make some adjustments to our zones. But that is how we believe we're going to meet the constitutional test.
Perfect. Thank you so much. The last, because I want to make sure that we can have some time for closing comments. There are a lot of questions around just the engagement. People who want to help and support in the area of mental health. People who want to know where they can find information about jobs. People who are looking for jobs and people who have jobs to offer. Like all of that, I just want to make sure before each person kind of does their sort of parting overall thing that we make sure that we're giving people a way to engage.
Well, the one thing I would say is, we tried to create on-ramps for lots of people to get involved, right? So as we mentioned, there's going to be work getting out to the services community and trying to bring in as many service providers that we think can help us on the service wheel. There's the Shine website, which will allow young people who have very specific goals, like looking for their CDL license, for example, and need financial help to get there, that, there's folks driving in from the county or all places saying, I want to support, but I don't want to roll down my window. Well, Shine will be a really good platform, or civic innovators if you're part of a business and you want to provide support that way. And so lots of different ways to get involved. And I am sure both Deputy Mayor Leach and Joe would agree. There's probably lots of ways that we aren't even thinking of that they can get involved in the future as this moves and again, shapes and shifts itself. Lots of ways. This is a community effort, as you saw. hundreds of people, not only 150 leaders, but 100 of citizens, folks emailing, going out to their local churches and other places, having these discussions. Lots of people are involved in this. And in that spirit, I think Joe said it earlier, we wanted this to be an inclusive effort. This is a Baltimore issue, not just Faith, Joe and myself's issue or Shelonda's issue. And so we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity as best we can to be involved in this effort.
Perfect, John. I don't know if that was a part of your close. It was a drop the
That's
mic.
my close.
That's your close. Okay, I'm gonna take it. Come down to you, Joe. Think if you may be muted.
I want to end on the promise of Baltimore. One of our young people, Davion, who is 22 years old, was just 2 credits short of graduating from high school. Through the mayor's office of African American male engagement, he reconnected with Baltimore City Schools. He earned the additional 2 credits. He got his diploma. He then registered for apprenticeship as a apprentice in welding. This week he set for his certification, right? Yesterday, a church partner reached out to me to ask about supporting some of the families of the Squeegee workers through Thanksgiving. So we put them in touch with Moaim and Tracy Eastap, who along with Dr. Bunley, the heart and soul of Moaim, they're working with that church now to facilitate Thanksgiving dinner being provided to some of the families of the young people. That's the promise. That's the beauty of who we are as a city.
Thank you, Joe. And I'll let you close it out, Deputy Mayor Leach.
Yes. Well, I want to close it out by thanking you, Shelonda. Thank you for just being the consummate partner and for giving us this platform to be able to share more about the Squeegee Collaborative. And then I want to shout out a number of businesses that were a part of the collaborative. So thank you, Augie, Chisera, and the folks over at M&T. Thank you, Laura at PNC, Waterfront Partnership was at the table, and our dear friends at Under Armour that stepped up in a very real way. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank the incredible Rowe Price, because they gave us John Brothers. And there were so many other.
And our partners at Care First.
Yes.
First, Southway
Brian,
Builders.
Care First. I know.
So
Okay.
many.
So
right?
I opened up the can of worms. Let me tell you, let me just shout out the entire business community in Baltimore who stepped up in a real way and showed us how much they care about our city. So I just really appreciate the business community for being partners in this work. And I'll close with this. At the start of this process, I said, and the mayor said, that we're going to learn a lot about ourselves as a city. And I think everyone who was a part of the collaborative can attest to that. We learned a lot about ourselves and we learned a lot about our city. And I think all of you, as we go through this process together, will continue to learn. And one of the things that I can tell you I've learned about Baltimore through this process is that we can do the hard things. We can do the hard things and we can do them well. And so this is a difficult challenge, but there is nothing that this city cannot do with all of the amazing businesses, community leaders, partners that work together to make things happen. So I just thank you all for believing in Baltimore and for believing that we can get this done. So thank you all.
Thank you all. Happy Friday.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.